Chairman Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And first, I want to thank both our distinguished witnesses here, two of my favorite members of Congress, and frankly, represent a committee that has far less partisanship and a far more cooperative attitude across the aisle. It's always been that way, continues under both of you. And I've had the opportunity to follow this pretty closely because I do sit on the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee of Appropriations. So what you're doing and have been doing obviously greatly impacts us as well. And I'm very pleased with the product that you've jointly produced. I recognize the differences in terms of OCO funding versus base funding, but I also recognize the point the chairman made that the number here is the same, and it's been thoroughly appropriated. And so I share my chairman's disappointment that we can't support this in a bipartisan way, because I do think we will get to a larger budget deal, and I pledge to work toward that end. But I think it's very important to get this done and passed, because it essentially was created in a bipartisan work process. The issue here is not the bill itself, and it's not the money itself. It's the spending on the non-military side of the budget. And I regret that the President's chosen to link this where we agree broadly with something where we disagree. It seems to me the art of governance is to pass the things where you agree, continue to work on the things where you disagree. But to use where you agree as a hostage to where you disagree strikes me as very unfortunate, to say the least. Partly because what we're using over here is we're holding the Defense Authorization Bill as a hostage, if you will, to get non-defense spending. And that means we're putting at risk things that need to be done for men and women in uniform that should simply not be subject to partisan dispute. We're using the military to try and force agreements in an area where we don't agree, and that's just wrong. I'm very sad about that. I'll venture a prediction, though. At the end of the day, most of your good work will indeed survive. We will indeed have a defense authorization bill, and I think the appropriators will be very faithful to the work that your committees produced and jointly. And we always have our own concerns over there and our own questions, but broadly, you draw the blueprint, we write the check, and I think at the end of the day, we'll be pretty close together on that. But I find it unfortunate that we're at this kind of disagreement, and I think it's largely, again, the administration playing domestic politics and using the defense budget and the defense authorization bill to do that. And that's just, I'm mystified, and I don't think most people, again, expect you to throw out where you disagree, where you agree, because you don't have 100% agreement. We should move ahead here. So again, I don't have any particular questions. I just want to thank you for your good work. Assure you that we're going to continue to work through this, and hopefully we can come to a larger budget deal. I'm encouraged by what I see happening, with the President and the Speaker, Majority Leader, and minority leaders beginning to have a round of communication. I'm encouraged by what I hope we'll do later today to buy the time to come to that agreement, and I'm very appreciative of you and your members in terms of how hard you've worked, because there are some really substantive things in this bill, some changes that need to be made. Very pleased with the retirement change. I think that's in the long-term best interest of men and women who do this. So again, your work product's an excellent work product. I wish we could all vote for it because it deserves that, but maybe we'll find that point of meeting a little bit further down the road.
Yeah, let me start by agreeing with your second point. I think you're right. I think we will get there. But I disagree strongly with your first point, that somehow it is wrong to look at the entire budget as part of a whole discussion. I mean, way back when we did the Budget Control Act, I mean, one of the concerns that people had was, too many, let me put it this way, too many in the Republican Party don't care about spending other than defense. And that if we allow defense through this backdoor deal of using the OCO, which is just wrong, frankly. It's, saying that this isn't really money when it really is money. And to dismiss the other appropriations spending as unrelated or unimportant is something I disagree with. And part of the concern, part of the problem, the biggest reason the president, is going to veto this is if we let defense out of jail, give it all of this money, then that's just, that makes it even that much more difficult to do anything about the budget caps on the other appropriations bills. And let's talk about those other appropriations bills, because they are not irrelevant. First of all, they're not irrelevant for national security. We're talking about the Department of Homeland Security. We're talking about the Treasury Department. We're talking about the Justice Department. All three of those play a critical role in national security. They are going to continue to be subject to the budget caps, or worse, a CR, if we don't get this fixed. But beyond that, national security is about more than being able to have a robust defense to meet adversaries who want to attack you. As we all know, our infrastructure in this country is crumbling. I still remember Thomas Friedman writing a column about how he flew from China to the U.S. one day, and he started off on some island. He took a high-speed boat over, and then he took a high-speed train to the Hong Kong airport, and then he landed in JFK. And he said he felt like he'd gone from the first world to the third, that basically the infrastructure that China had, was embarrassing. And how many bridges have to collapse in this country before we fund transportation? So, holding hostage defense, it's part of the entire appropriations process. And those other bills matter. And if we just say, you know what, we're going to fund defense and we're going to gut everything else, I don't think we're meeting our obligation on the Armed Services Committee to adequately provide for the national security of this country. I think those things matter. And unfortunately, and I know that, Mr. Cole, you are not in this category, that you are one who you advocated for lifting the budget caps, for having a more sensible budget approach. I know that. But unfortunately, your colleagues who are not in that camp, have put us through 5 years of appropriations hell. And I don't think you'll disagree with that. I mean, the Appropriations Committee has become borderline irrelevant because it doesn't pass a bill. We do a CR, maybe, we managed to get the 2-year deal in 2015, 2016, to sort of quasi do something. I want the Appropriations Committee to matter again. I want it to start appropriating. And if we say, you know what, we'll sort of cheat here and we'll say that this $38 billion isn't real money, it doesn't count against the cap, so we'll kind of fund defense. And by the way, it's kind of funding defense. It doesn't give them the ability to plan past 1 year. It's one-time money. They don't know if it's going to be there next year. So it's not even a great fix for defense, but at the same time, it locks in these budget caps that we don't agree with. And I think that's a legitimate argument and a legitimate concern because of how important those budget caps are.
Let my friend respond, then I'll respond as well.
Well, I just want to make 2 brief points. Number one is this is an authorization bill. It does not let defense out of jail. Unfortunately, you and others on the Defense Appropriation Committee still have to figure out a way to pass a bill. So back to the chairman's point, this doesn't do away with that, and why not do the good we can, understanding that there is more work to be done. Second, let me give you a little bit of hope. Both the House and the Senate passed their defense authorization bills with the OCO funding, which was consistent with the budget resolution. The Senate vote was 71 to 25, which is enough to override a veto. Now, we did not quite get enough votes to override a veto here, but a number of Democrats supported our authorization bill. Mr. Smith is in a leadership position, and I respect that he gets put in some difficult positions, and he very well defends his thoughts on that. But there are others who make different judgments, and so I'm hopeful that this conference report, with all the good it does, with the adjustments that have been made in it, and with what's happening in the world today, will get the support not only of our colleagues, but ultimately the President. Thank you.
I share the chairman's hope, and again, I have enormous respect for both of you because you're excellent members. But just to make a point, look, we're dealing with sequester because that was the president's suggestion and idea in 2011. And
We're dealing with sequester because
could I
Congress
finish my
passed
point? I think I allowed you to
Yes,
finish
I know,
yours,
but
and
I
I
can-
certainly will recognize you again if you want to respond. But that was his suggestion. And, you know, out of this, sadly, and I put bipartisan blame on this. You know, we were all told there's a super committee, it's going to work something out, and they failed.
Yeah.
And so we've been dealing with this on appropriations just as you've been feeling with this on House Armed Services. But this was the president's suggestion. Now, he's offered a way to pay for the additional money with tax increases. Just as a matter of political observations, that's not going to happen. We're not going to raise taxes, you know, just not going to occur. There is, I would suggest, a model here, and I say this hoping that there are other ears listening, that we have actually done this year, and that's the doc fix. With a modicum of bipartisan agreed upon entitlement reform, we freed up the money to solve what's been a vexing problem around here for a generation. I think we can do the same thing here. And you know, the president has in the past actually put proposals on the table in his own budget that entail some entitlement reform, change CPI, Medicare means testing. There may be others out there. I have no doubt there's a variety of things. I think that's where we could find some common ground, and we could get these where they want to go. I will say, by the way, in defense of my own committee, the Appropriations Committee, we're not exactly irrelevant around here. With all due respect, you know, we've already passed through our committee. I chair the Labor H subcommittee. I think it puts more money than the president asked for in NIH, more money in TRIO, more money in Gear Up, more money. You can do a lot of things. And if we get more money, there'll be some other areas we could agree on. I would very much like to move where the president wants to go in early childhood. I think he had an excellent proposal. It was too robust with a number for us to have, but we moved part way. We did manage to increase. There'll be some other areas where we disagree, but you know, we managed to work that through for a couple of years under Ryan Murray. We really did have an omnibus, I'll grant you that, which actually, from an appropriator standpoint, that's just unfair to you guys. I mean, we're still engaged in the process. You just don't bring the product down to the floor where any member can have that opportunity. And a lot of this is due to dysfunction in the United States Senate, which has not had an appropriations bill on the floor since, I think, 2011, because under Democratic control, they wouldn't do it, and they wouldn't allow any bills on this year, even though all of them were finished by the Appropriations Committee. So dysfunction on that side of the Capitol spills over onto this side of the Capitol, because your own people began to say, they're not going to pick up any bills. They're not going to go through the amendment process. Why should we over here? Because it's going to be a big omnibus at the end of the process anyway. So I think we have a rare opportunity here to actually break out of this situation. I very much appreciate Leader McConnell's suggestion, a 2-year agreement, bipartisan agreement, what the number would be. You could do your authorization work. We would all know the numbers we were working with. You know, I think we could have a very productive process if they can get to that larger agreement. So last point I'll make, again, I appreciate your work here because I think it's really valuable work. I think you guys really worked together and made some really important reforms and changes. And if those above our collective pay grade in this room can come to an agreement, you know, I guarantee you I can vote for the agreement almost certainly that they come to. And then I think we could actually have a normal appropriations process for a couple of years. Members would be amazed how well the process works, how much input they individually will have, even in areas where they do not sit on the committee, and how much less contention there'll be around here. So I know my friends are very responsible legislators, and I know they'll look at anything that the President, the Speaker, the Majority Leader, the 2 minority leaders come to. But that, to me, is the way out of here. This is not, in my view, the right way to do it from the President's standpoint. But hey, he's the President of the United States. He's got a right to play his cards the way he wants. But I would prefer, when we have agreement, to move the things that we agree on, because I do think success breeds success. The habit of cooperation and builds trust and relationship. And I think we're missing an opportunity here because this is a bipartisan piece of work. It's a good work product. It was done together. You get something like this done, then I think it makes it easier, not harder, to get to the next stage. And I guess that's just where we have a disagreement. But with that, Mr. Chairman, I took more time than I intended to. I yield back.